that would be in recognition of the fact that two of our members are attending their last meeting as members, Martine Perez and Susan McHugh. Bill Best, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Martine Perez, whereas we, your colleagues and friends, wish to gratefully acknowledge your years of service to Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, as a public governor since July 1, 2013, and whereas throughout your distinguished tenure, you have provided sound and thoughtful counsel to countless committees, including the Committee on Audit, the Committee on Health Affairs, and the Joint Committee on Investments, and whereas a member of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs for 7 years and a member of the Committee on Alumni and University Relations for 4 years, your unyielding passion and abiding commitment to the students at the university is undeniable. And whereas you have devoted countless hours to the advancement of your alma mater and have been a visionary voice for Rutgers University, providing guidance to various advisory boards and committees throughout your tenure. And whereas an advocate for greater access and equality, you have modeled what it means to serve in the public's best interest as a member of the Board of Governors and a leader in numerous community and social organizations, displaying a profound concern for matters impacting the state of New Jersey and its local communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Board of Governors, the State University of New Jersey, express their deepest gratitude and heartfelt thanks to Martine Perez for his distinguished service to the university and the Board of Governors, and extend their warmest best wishes for the future. Board of Governors, Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, February 23, 2021. Mr. Chair, I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Then by acclamation. Thank you, Bill. Martine, thank you for these many years of faithful service. We are very, very, very grateful.
It's been a pleasure serving my alma mater. Good luck and take care of our organization.
Thank you, Martine. Susan McHugh. I'm sitting here looking at a note from the governor of New Jersey commending you on your service. Another one from Stephen Van Zandt, famed star of The Sopranos, musician and general wonderful person, and some others. Whereas we, your colleagues and friends, wish gratefully to acknowledge your passion and commitment to Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, as a public governor since December 18th, 2014. And whereas you have proudly served your alma mater through your participation on the Board of Governors Committee on Audit, the Committee on Health Affairs, and the Committee on Alumni and University Relations, and whereas as a member of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs for 5 years, serving as chair of that committee for 1 full year, you continually probed consequential issues facing students at the university, strove for the betterment of the entire university community, and whereas you have staunchly advocated for all Rutgers locations, serving as a member of the Camden Board of Directors for the past 4 years and as vice chair of that board for the last 2 years, and whereas you're astute and wise counsel while you served on the Board of Governors Executive Committee for 5 years, have been critical to the success of the university as your expertise in public affairs bolstered the board's ability to navigate the university's most delicate issues. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Board of Governors of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, express their deepest gratitude and heartfelt thanks to Susan M. McHugh for her distinguished service to the university and the Board of Governors, and we extend our warmest best wishes for the future, and we hope that you won't go very far away. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
You? Any objections? Then by acclamation, Susan McHugh, Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Moving on.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mark.
President. Pleasure, Susan. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. I want to add my own appreciation for Susan McHugh and Martine Perez for their boards. So I can't say I personally benefited from the years of your experience, but I know that you have given years to Rutgers. And I wish you all the best as you transition for the board transition off of the Board of Governors. I have a few items I want to talk about today, series of very nice points, a bit of tough bit of a discussion, and then wrapping up with, I think, a very important new step in Rutgers and how it tells its story to the world. First, with the good news, I'm very proud, having done nothing to deserve being, having not contributed to it personally. Rutgers has been listed among the top producers of Fulbright U.S. student grants for the 12th year in a row. You will recognize the very short list of schools who've also pulled this off. It's a list of maybe 8 schools, Ivy schools and peer Ivy schools, and Rutgers is right in the mix, as it deserves to be. So hats off to those incredibly talented individuals who are landing these grants and to the support structure that has helped them get to that place. We have 3 finalists for the Truman Scholarship. That's 3, that's quite remarkable. 2 are from Rutgers Camden, and a finalist for the Knight Hennessy Award at Stanford. All of these awards are very special. They are finalists, and so we don't know yet if they'll win those awards, but just being in that very small group is cause for celebration. It'll be cause for larger celebration if they're able to succeed in landing those awards. We did have a finalist for the Luce Scholarship, another quite outstanding accomplishment. And although the individual did not get selected, I want to make sure we acknowledge the hard work that got that person to that particular round of the Luce. Finally on this front, we recently learned that 2 physics professors, Blakesley Burkhart and Jedediah Pixley, were named 2021 Sloan Research Scholars, an award given to outstanding early career scientists and scholars. So round of applause from me for all this good news for these people who are in the final rounds, and hopefully will be able to acknowledge their true accomplishments if they receive the awards I mentioned, and of course to our Sloan Research Fellows. Changing gears, as you all know, I recently made the incredibly difficult and painful announcement that we will not be having in-person commencement ceremonies this spring. I want everybody to know I did not arrive at this decision lightly. And I recognize that this news has been devastating to many students and many families. I have heard from a large number of them directly and indirectly. They all deserve better. They do, and frankly, we all do. But the virus does not care about our emotions. We are in the middle of a deadly pandemic. Our graduating class is tremendously large, and we simply don't have the capacity to conduct these events safely across every campus. We did look into how we could manage some sort of commencement exercise and to do it at a scale in which everybody could commence. I'm talking small venues, appropriately spaced out. It would literally take 99 ceremonies across our 3 undergraduate campuses, putting RVHS and New Brunswick in one campus lump here, across our three campuses, 99 events, 3 times a day for 2 weeks straight. We simply don't have the capacity to pull that off. I will fully admit, as some people have written in letters to me, very reasonable letters, that yes, smaller units could safely conduct in-person socially distanced graduation. But it is impossible for our larger units, like New Brunswick.
Same thing as before.
It's impossible for our larger units, like New Brunswick SAS, to do so. And in the name of equity across the university, I'm not going to let our smaller units graduate while larger ones simply can't do so. There are times when equity is deeply uncomfortable. This is one of those moments, but for the sake of the larger community, I think this is the right thing to do. And I will note, of course, we are seeing headlines about the number of cases going down in the country, which is wonderful. What people don't pay attention to right now is that we are still higher than we were in the summer peak that had everybody quite concerned this past summer. These numbers are still very high. Vaccine rollouts are halting and complicated, made more complicated by the weather recently in New Jersey. We have the capacity, as Brian Strom has told me on a number of occasions, Chancellor Strom, to deliver a great amount of vaccine. We simply aren't getting it in New Jersey, not at the levels that we need. And so while there are vaccinated populations amongst our graduating students this year, especially those people in RBHS, again, in the sense of equity, because so many of our students and their families will not be vaccinated, again, we simply can't proceed. And finally, with the unknown fact of what the variants that are emerging, what their the rate of contagion, or how contagious they are and how virulent they are, is evolving information. Another reason why I did not want to risk exposing our community to these variants, and to turn the Rutgers event into a super spreader event. For me, these are all compelling. Am I being conservative and cautious? I absolutely am. And that is for the health and welfare for this entire community. One last thing I'll say is that I know the chancellors are already at work within their respective communities to find creative ways to celebrate what deserves to be celebrated in May, and also are already at work in trying to find alternative sites for a proper recognition ceremony in person sometime in this fall. We've already started those conversations in New Brunswick as well, in addition to what's happening on the other chancellor-led units. More information on that when we have dates. We want to make sure we celebrate the class of 2020 and the class of 2021 in the way that they deserve. And I deeply regret, but am steadfast about this current decision regarding commencement. Now, if I could just, if you bear with me for just a couple more minutes, I need to change my own screen here 1 second. I want to thank you, Pat, for bringing up the slide. You can, yeah, exactly. I want to talk about Scarlet and Black historical markers. So, in this presentation, I want to say I've invited Professor Deborah Gray White to join me in this presentation. I'll turn to Professor Gray White at the end of my comments to see if she has anything to add, or if I am misstating something along the way. I don't think I will, but in case I am, I will always defer to Professor Gray White to interrupt me. She is one of my mentors in my career, and she does know this topic in a local sense better than I do. So with that said,
Mr. President, may I interrupt for just 1 sec, please?
yes.
Professor Deborah Gray White is always welcome here. She served as vice chair of the search committee, as you know, that brought you to this great university. We didn't hear anything about her being your mentor at that time. Maybe we should revisit this subject on a serious note. Mr. President, back to you.
I'll let future history determine whether I should have disclosed anything along those lines or not. Any smart scholar working in African-American history consider Deborah Gray White a mentor. She is that good, and you all know that anyway, and I want her to know that too. And anyway, Scarlet and Black historical markers. When I was a candidate for the position, I was doing a deep dive into looking at how Rutgers tells its story. This is what one expects of any particular candidate. I can't exactly tell you which website I was on, but it wasn't many clicks when I found myself discovering that Rutgers was celebrating Paul Robeson. I didn't know it was the 100th, it was the tail end of his 100th anniversary of his commencement. But Robeson recognition was everywhere, which was, from my understanding of Rutgers, having followed the university at different points in its time, a break with its past. I discovered soon after the existence of a marker on campus that recognized the work of forced labor. I discovered an apartment building, a dormitory, I think the newest one at the time, named after Sojourner Truth. And I found myself quite astonished because universities as old as Rutgers do not have a great track record in telling their stories that might shine less than anything but positive light upon their behavior. Rutgers was doing serious work in this regard. And so this is one of the reasons I actually thought this would be an appealing institution, because here was a place that was unafraid to talk about difficult histories. Now, I discovered that this journey into these histories was partly because of the drive to prepare for Rutgers' 250th anniversary. And out of that drive, out of that planning, emerged what emerged as Scarlet and Black. Pat, you can go ahead one more slide here. The Scarlet and Black Committee, formed in 2015, that was charged to examine the university's uncomfortable and unacknowledged injustices. This, I want to emphasize, Scarlet and Black has now turned into 2 volumes. This is a cover shot of the first one. A 3rd volume is forthcoming. This project is an academic project, the project I'm presenting to you today. That's very important to me, that if we are going to do the work of telling our story, we need to rely on our own scholars and scholarship to do so. This is Rutgers telling its story. Scarlet and Black does an exceptional job in explaining this untold story, talking about our early founders and benefactors and the way they were involved in the slave trade, and explaining how the college benefited from Native American removal, breaking ground on land once occupied by the Lenape. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, when I was a candidate, I discovered on a website this marker, Will's Way, that's outside of Old Queens, that is planted in recognition of Will's labor in the role of slavery in Rutgers' early history. This marker, really quite beautifully done, is in the spirit of historic landmarks that one would see when you travel around the country. It is done in the spirit of the Equal Justice Initiative, landmark work by Brian Stevenson in Montgomery, Alabama, that is telling a story in a way that is respectful of the physical environment, and it is not shying away from difficult elements of in terms of the Equal Justice Institute, stories about Montgomery or other places. Rutgers is doing the same thing in constructing this signpost, and I'm proud to be part of a community that recognizes these difficult pasts. On my first day my first press conference on July 6th, I received questions about what else Rutgers was doing in this regard. And I confess to being confused because I was very impressed by what it had done already. It's really far ahead of the curve as far as universities of its vintage in terms of telling its story. So where had Rutgers gone wrong is what I was wondering standing at the podium. And I was asked specific questions about several buildings on campus I'd never heard of. Granted, I'd been 5 days on campus and had not had the chance to transition here because of COVID. So I was a bit lost, and then talked with my senior team after that to try to understand what the conversations were. I am not, as a historian, my first reaction is not to change the names of buildings, but it's to understand what the narrative is behind the name of a building, on the name of a building, and try to make some corrective amends. I think Will's Way is a perfect example of this. And so when I found out about certain places on campus and the troubled histories that had not been talked about, I charged my senior team to pick up the baton that I felt had been dropped from the work of Scarlet and Black, ask that committee to reconvene under Professor Gray White's leadership and help advise us as a way forward. So today I'm talking about what our next steps are going to be. Next slide. We will acknowledge our past. These 4 stars are more or less located on this map where more signs are going to be erected on Livingston, College Avenue, and Cook Douglas campuses. We will have markers, next slide. This gives you a sense of scale. Large markers that are very much in the theme of Will's Way, but with the Scarlet and Black embossment, I'll call it, at the very top in that circle, but very handsome, very large signs. I think, if I have it, I think they're made of brass, but very sturdy. That will be outside of buildings in a very prominent location that will tell the story of the building where it's located. Next slide. So I generally don't read slides. I mean, that you guys can read and such, but I do want to linger over these 4 slides so you can see the work that Scarlet and Black Committee has done. On each slide, you'll see a primary source related to the story of, related in some way to the building or the space that bears a name. And we have the Scarlet and Black Committee went and did its research, built back on its older research, and is the committee, academics who pulled together the language that when it was presented to me, I accepted. So outside of Hardenberg Hall, we'll read, Hardenberg Hall was built in 1956 and named for Jacob Ruffston Hardenberg, who profited from the enslavement of Black people. Hardenberg was a founder of Queens College, later renamed Rutgers College, and appointed its first president. He was a Dutch Reformed minister who came from a prominent slaveholding family in Ulster County, New York. Hardenberg forced enslaved people to manage his household. We do not know how many or the names of enslaved people who came in and out of Hardenberg's parsonage over the years, but his family owned many, including renowned abolitionist Sojourner Truth and her parents, Bomfrey and Mau Mau Bet. This marker honors Sojourner Truth, Bomfrey, and Mau Mau Bet, and the other women, men, and children enslaved by the Hardenberg family. Next slide. There'll be a marker outside of Frelinghuysen Hall. Built in 1856, Frelinghuysen Hall is named for Theodorus Jacobus Frelinghuysen, a Dutch Reformed Church theologian who enslaved Black people. His sons, Theodorus Jacobus Jr. II and Johannes, were instrumental in founding what became Rutgers College. Although most of these Frelinghuysen enslaved are unknown, most names of those Frelinghuysen enslaved are unknown, Ukasal Groniosaw's experience in bondage was documented in his 1772 world-renowned autobiography, which you'll see the first page on next to this slide. Groniosaw's narrative describes how he was captured in West Africa, forcibly brought to New York, and enslaved by Frelinghuysen in his Raritan Valley home. Frelinghuysen's legacy continued through his grandson Theodore, a US congressman, and a leader in the American Colonization Society, who advocated for the forced removal of African Americans from the nation. This marker honors Ukasal Groniosau and all the women, men, and children enslaved by the Frelinghuysen family. Next slide. Woodlawn Mansion over in Cook Douglas. Woodlawn Mansion, originally known as Woodlawn, this house was built in 1830 for Colonel James Nielsen, an early Rutgers trustee who profited from enslaving Black people. Nielsen funded this estate with the substantial wealth he inherited from generations of his family's deep involvement with slavery. This marker honors Tony, Prince, Tunis, Elizabeth, Flora, and her daughters Phyllis and Anne, and the Harris family, which included Ambo, her husband Mark, and their children Clara, Anne, Eliza, and Mark Jr., who were all enslaved by the Nielsen family. Finally, on the Livingston campus. Livingston campus, originally known as Livingston College, was named after William Livingston, the first governor of the state of New Jersey, whose family made a fortune trafficking human beings in the transatlantic slave trade. The campus opened in 1969 as an experimental social justice-oriented campus at the site of Camp Kilmer, a World War II era military camp. The Livingston family collectively enslaved hundreds of people, and Williams's brothers, Philip and Robert, two of Rutgers' founding trustees, bought and sold hundreds more. When William Livingston moved to New Jersey, he enslaved at least two people, a woman named Belle and her son Lambert. Though he later advocated for gradual abolition, he continued to represent the legal interest of his slave trading family well throughout his career. This marker honors Belle, Lambert, and the other women, men, and children enslaved and sold by the Livingston family. I want to be clear to those who might be troubled by this marker project. It is troubling. There's no doubt about it. History is often troubling, but I think mature institutions who are confident in who they are in the present can handle and withstand telling stories about their past. It is the guiding light that charts our path forward by being honest about who we have been, allowing us to make declarations that we are not those places anymore, and sets the standard for what we are going to be, and with new values for new eras. With that, I'll turn it over to Professor Deborah Gray White if she has anything to add.
Good afternoon. I do want to say that we have changed slightly the marker for the Frelinghuysen Hall, and that's because there are so many Theodores and Frederick Frelinghuysen's that we had to make sure that we got them all right. So there's just been a slight change, which I won't go into it, but we managed to make sure that it was, I think at first we said that it was named for Frederick Frelinghuysen. And as you know, there were many Frederick Frelinghuysen's and there were many Theodore Frelinghuysen's. And we just changed it slightly so that we do know that it's the Frelinghuysen family that we're talking about. We just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that if you're keeping track, that we've noticed that we've noticed some changes that needed to be made. So, but besides that, I just have Rutgers campus is not adorned with statues of Confederate generals or Jim Crow ideologues, but its statues, its buildings, and the names around campus venerate men whose wealth was built on the sale of Black people and their free labor. The faculty and curriculum at Rutgers endorsed and taught ideas of Black inferiority throughout the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. With these markers, we not only take note of the early marriage of the academy and exploitation of Black bodies, but we begin the process of recognizing its legacy, the exclusion of Black people from Rutgers campuses until the late 19th century, and the restrictions against their presence until the Black, in any numbers, in any case, until the Black freedom movement in the latter part of the 20th century. This is an acknowledgement of Rutgers' past, which is meant to strengthen it as it goes forth. I'd like to announce that volume 3 of the Rutgers of the Scarlet and Black series is now in press and should be out in late March or early April. It's entitled Making Black Lives Matter at Rutgers, 1945 to 2020. And we not only is that going to be out, but we invite you to view our web archive. This has all been part of a singular project begun in 2015 under the direction initially of Chancellor, under the Chancellor at the time, Richard, gosh, I know him by his first name.
Edwards.
Edwards. You know, I called him so often, I call him just Dick, you know, so like, yeah, so, but in any case, we've come, you know, we will be continuing the Scarlet and Black Project in the new Center for Racial Justice that's going to be, that has been established at Rutgers. And we're just happy. Let me just say that since Chancellor Malloy is here and there are representatives from all of the departments at Rutgers, that we are really happy for all of the support that we have received from the Chancellor's office and from the Dean's office and from, you know, just from the library to the Theological Seminary. This was indeed a communal project that brought in so many parts of Rutgers. So thank you for letting me advertise and promote the Scarlet and Black Project. We may still be coming to some of your units for additional support. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for the correction. This is a living project with Frelinghuysen, and so we'll of course make those adjustments. But I do want to emphasize this is a living project. These markers are in the New Brunswick campus, but the issues that Professor Gray-White has talked about and I referenced are throughout Rutgers of all of our chancellorate units. And so as Scarlet and Black continues its work, this product will continue. I suspect there'll be more historical markers, and safe to say, there'll be more historical markers coming down in the future, but I wanted to make sure we got started as quickly as possible in my administration and beginning to continue the work of making amends and telling our history properly. With that, thank you, Professor Gray-White, and I turn it over to you, Chair Engelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Professor Gray-White. I reiterate, you always are welcome here. Mr. Crateville, the floor is yours to address us on the resolution on liquidity. Sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Charles Crateville from New Brunswick, alumnus of the university. I wanted to ask if somebody can elaborate a little bit on what financial institutions might be involved in this borrowing, if I understand it correctly, 300 million.
Charlie, you know well that nobody's going to elaborate. Please respect the decorum of this meeting and make your statement.
With all due respect, I am being respectful and just wanted to prompt, if I could, a discussion on this matter so that the public can better understand what is going on at our beloved state university. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So could someone elaborate on the $300 million move? Why won't you elaborate?
Charlie, read the rules, please. Kim, I think Mr. Crateville is finished. Thank you very much. Mr. President, is there anything further that you would like to say?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. This section of the agenda is designed for me to offer comments on comments that have been offered in public in the public session. But in this case, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Banks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer Antonio Toledo presented for endorsement a resolution approving and naming the Bruce and Phyllis Nicholas Engineering Student Projects Studio on the Bush campus. This 5,000 square foot single store building will provide space for the School of Engineering students to work on hands-on projects in an environment that fosters teamwork and originality. This will be Rutgers' first net zero building and is sited to accommodate future expansion. The capital cost will not exceed $7.3 million. Bruce Nicholas, an engineering graduate from 1949, and his spouse, Phyllis Walker Nicholas, have provided a generous gift of $2 million to underwrite this construction. The school will borrow the balance from the university's internal bank. Mr. Chair, I move the resolution to approve the project and naming of this facility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a second for the motion, please?
Second.
Is there discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Resolution is passed. Back to
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Banks.
Mr. Chair, for the next item, I'm going to ask my fellow governor, Mr. Bill Tambuzzi, to report on the next resolution. I am accusing myself, as I noted earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer J. Michael Gower and Associate Treasurer Adam Day presented for endorsement a resolution authorizing the implementation of liquidity support for the university's commercial paper program. This authorizes the Chief Financial Officer to establish a revolving credit facility with a commercial bank in addition to existing liquidity facilities to provide emergency liquidity to the program up to a combined amount of $300 million. the current authorized level. Selection of the specific vehicles will be through a formal bid process. Mr. Chair, I move the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain, Mr. Chair.
The resolution is passed. Kim, is there a way to summon our recused members back into the meeting?
Yes, I've brought them back in. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue. Mr. Calcado presented for endorsement 3 resolutions totaling $25 million over a 5-year period, borrowed from the internal bank for a revolving fund for projects on each campus to provide fire safety improvements, building and site accessibility improvements, and classroom safety improvements. Each project within these programs may be small, but collectively this will address high priorities as identified through an assessment process. Mr. Chair, these resolutions are under the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Banks.
Under matters for information, President Holloway, Mr. Calcado presented an update regarding campus markers, as he noted in his report today. Mr. Moore discussed the fiscal year 2021 financial report that compared the revenue and expense performance through December 31st, 2020 to the overall fiscal year budget for 2021. Through December, most of the university's revenues categories were on track to achieve the level approved in the fiscal year 2021 budget, with the exception of housing, dining, and similar revenues due to fewer students living on campus and purchasing meal plans. Mr. Moore continued with a review of the expense categories that showed each category below the level of expenditures experienced in the previous 3 fiscal years, which will help with the university's financial outlook for fiscal year 2021. Mr. Chair, this concludes the report of the Finance and Facilities Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks. Before we move on, I noticed that Mr. Schimbrot has a hand raised. Sir.
Thank you very much. I would like to enter into the meeting notes, the Board of Governors meeting rules, the PDF that was adopted April 7th, 2020, which says nothing whatsoever about answering or asking questions.
That's nice. You're out of order. Moving on.
I don't know why I'm out of order. The Board of Governors rules is what you cited to forbid Charlie Cradaville from continuing with his discussion. And the Board of Governors rules is only 1 page, and it does not say that you may not ask questions.
It does, however, sir, say, my golly, you're out of order, Mr. Schimbrot. One more time and we will cut you off, sir.
You're breaking up. Can you repeat that? You're breaking up. I'm sorry.
You're out of order, Mr. Schimbrot.
I don't understand why.
Mr. Schimbrot, if you persist, we will have to cut you off. I hope you won't.
I hope you will read the rules. Thank you, sir.
The Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, Mr. Hundley, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a committee report on the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, which was held on February 10th, 2021 via virtual on Zoom. The meeting was called to order at 1 p.m. And regarding the School of Health Professions, Dr. Brian Strom, Chancellor of Rutgers Biomedical and Health Sciences, Executive Vice President, Health Affairs, advised that the School of Health Professions is proposing the conversion of the option of cytopathology within the existing Master of Science in Clinical Laboratory Science from a track to full program status, and is changing the name to the Master of Science in Diagnostic Cytopathology. Chancellor Strom then informed the members that the degree program will be offered as a 49 credit entry-level program and as a 35 credit post-professional program. Regarding the School of Management and Labor Relations, Dr. Christopher Malloy, our Chancellor of Rutgers University, New Brunswick, informed the committee that the School of Management and Labor Relations has offered the Master of Labor and Employment Relations, MLER, for many years as a traditional on-campus classroom-based 39 credit program. Dr. Strom then reported that due to the pandemic, the school is now offering a new online course, new online courses, and spoke about a new online option with the MLER, which is requiring 36 credits that will be offered for working professionals. The committee then met in executive session to discuss personnel matters, including faculty tenure, appointment, and administrative appointment recommendations. Members also heard from Chancellor Malloy, who presented for consideration Dr. James Murphy as the third holder of the Ralph Geiger Chair in Turfgrass Science, and Chancellor Strom on the creation of the Jacqueline Krieger Klein Endowed Director's Chair in Neurodegeneration Research. The committee agreed to endorse these items for board approval, and they have been placed on today's consent agenda. The meeting then adjourned at 1:30 p.m. Mr. Chair, this concludes the report on the Committee of Academic and Student Affairs. Thank you.
Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Floor is yours.
The
Can you
committee
hear
on,
me?
you're cutting in and out.
Sorry.
The Committee on Audit met from 9 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. on Thursday, January 21st, 2021 via Zoom. Mr. J. Michael Gower, Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration and University Treasurer, reviewed the annual report of professional services fees of $100,000 or more for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, and answered questions from the committee. Dr. Timothy J. Fournier, Senior Vice President, Risk Management, discussed the committee's role in understanding, reviewing, and setting the scope of compliance and ethics activities at the university. Dr. Fournier also gave a brief update on increased education underway to raise awareness on the risk of undue foreign influence on federally funded research. Mr. Eugene Simon, Associate Vice President and Deputy Chief Enterprise Risk Management, Ethics and Compliance Officer, provided an overview on how university ethics and compliance is working to assess the compliance programs across the university and strive for its continuous improvement. Ms. Ruth Philo, Chief Audit Executive, informed the committee on updates to the 2021 annual audit plan to maximize audit effectiveness with available resources. Ms. Philo also discussed recent staffing changes, completed audit services, audits in progress, and presented the implementation status for past audits. Ms. Shelley Massey, KPMG Lead Partner, and Ms. Lawrence Weingard, KPMG Senior Manager, gave the committee a brief update on the status of the auditor's report on the financial statements of the university and other deliverables for the firm's 2020 audit. As part of her comments, Ms. Massey said the agreed upon procedures report on the university's intercollegiate athletics program for the year ended June 30th, 2020 was issued on January 13th, 2021 to meet the requirements to file with the university president. The committee then met in private executive session with Mr. Gower and then Dr. Fournier and Mr. John J. Hoffman, General Counsel. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my report on the Committee on Audit.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Please, may we hear from Ms. Towers, the Committee on Health Affairs.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Health Affairs met on February the 2nd. We called the meeting to order at 9 a.m. and adjourned our meeting at 12:30 p.m. We began the meeting with Dr. Frank Ganassi, President and Chief Executive Officer of University Behavioral Health Center and the University Correctional Health, citing 3 matters that will require the committee's endorsement and will be moved under the consent agenda today. The first one is the minutes of the University Behavioral Health Care Leadership Committee. The second, the university behavioral health care staff appointments, reappointment, and clinical privileges. And third, the university behavioral health care quality improvement report. All three were endorsed by the committee and will be moved under the consent agenda today. We moved on and Dr. Ganassi explained that the UBHC has been working very diligently with Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health at physician practices to convert roughly 250 primary care practices with allocated behavioral health in them to an integrated health model using the Cherokee model. Dr. Ganassi also noted that community-based programs are continuing to expand and that UBHC is now in 129 schools across New Jersey, providing behavioral health both virtually and in person in 26 districts. He noted that UBHC is also expanding its early and post-release programs to 5 intensive recovery programs, each of which can handle up to 200 individuals. Dr. Ganassi further explained that UBHC is very active with call center lines and has set up a COVID-19 line with the state that helps individuals across New Jersey dealing with stress, anxiety, or behavioral health issues relating from this pandemic. Finally, Dr. Ganassi explained that UBHC is currently providing care at approximately 30% inpatient and 70% remote, depending on transportation needs, clinical preferences, acuity of care, and safety protocols. We then had a guest to the meeting. Dr. Panettiere presented on the Rutgers Institute for Translational Medicine and Science and the work the Institute has undertaken over the last 4 years. He specifically reviewed experimentation related to asthma, including the examination of a human lung slice model. He added that this is only one of many platforms that the Institute has embraced to allow high throughput discoveries in humans so that these discoveries can be translated into new therapeutics. He then discussed the New Jersey Alliance for Clinical and Translational Science grant, noting that this grant is a partnership between Rutgers as the home institution, Princeton, and the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Rutgers is the only and inaugural hub to the CTSA program and is one of 52 hubs across the nation funded through the National Institutes of Health. Following this report, Dr. Brian Strom, Chancellor for Rutgers Biomedical and Health Services and Executive Vice President for Health Affairs, began by commenting on the loss of Dr. Andy Brooks, his sudden passing, and the extraordinary impact on Rutgers University and the world. The Chancellor further reiterated his goals and provided an overview of RBHS. Chancellor Strom then addressed the COVID-19 pandemic, reviewed risk levels, and noted that New Jersey currently ranks 6th in the country in terms of COVID-19 cases. Dr. Strom expressed his appreciation to all healthcare workers in RBHS and discussed the number of vaccines distributed throughout the country. Dr. Strom concluded remarks on the pandemic by discussing the positivity rate on campus and the contact tracing performed by the university. Next, Dr. Strom discussed that 174 RBHS faculty members have been elected to honorific societies in 2020. There will be an additional elected in 2021, and 99 RBHS physicians were recognized as top docs by peer physicians. Dr. Strom concluded with RBHS fundraising goals, key appointments within RBHS, and a review of FY21 goals. Moving on to the financial update in the committee, Ms. Kathleen Bramwell, the Senior Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration, provided an update on FY21 year-to-date financial performance of RBHS. We concluded our meeting with a report by Dr. Gracia, Senior Vice Chancellor for Clinical Affairs and Vice President for Health Affairs, with a further overview of the COVID-19 pandemic and review of the achievements of Rutgers Health throughout this pandemic. Dr. Gracias discussed testing and the success of the targeted testing strategy, highlighting the increased frequency of testing at Rutgers. He explained that Rutgers student volunteers have enabled the university to assemble and stockpile over 30,000 test kits at our university. Dr. Gracias then discussed the vaccine rollout and added that the state and federal governments determined who can be vaccinated, but there is flexibility within these tiers. He then walked the committee through the planned phasing program for the vaccinations. Dr. Gracias discussed health education and provided an update on graduate medical education as well. He also touched on the clinical workforce development planning program with our WJBH and discussed interprofessional practice planning. Dr. Gracias concluded his report with a review of key performance indicators for the Rutgers Health Group. Mr. Chair, this concludes my report of the Health Affairs Committee.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Committee on Intercollegiate Athletics met on February 1st virtually for 2 hours from 1 to 3. The committee began its meeting with an academic update from Mr. Scott Walker, Director of Academic Service. Mr. Walker praised his staff and the work done throughout the pandemic, noting the team was designed to support about 600 student athletes, but is now supporting 750 student athletes. He stated that the Division of Athletics had 123 student athletes selected to the All Big Ten academic team, up from 100 last year. He also noted that 318 student athletes made the Dean's List for the fall, which is 43% of the entire student athlete base. Mr. Walker pointed out that since the university instituted a pass no credit option for students, he examined the current grades in relation to grades received prior to the pass no credit option being offered to students. He then reviewed term and cumulative GPAs for each team with the committee. He added that the student GPAs were strong before the pass no credit option, and the department is very pleased about the successful transition students made to online learning. Finally, Mr. Walker briefly discussed the opening of the Gary and Barbara Rodkin Academic Success Center and the impact it will have on students. Mr. Pat Hobbs then provided the general athletics update and highlighted the success of various teams, including men's basketball, which at the time had just beat Northwestern University and was tied for the longest winning streak in the Big Ten. He also highlighted the men's basketball team's first ever wins over Indiana University and Michigan State. Mr. Hobbs then discussed the pandemic's impact on the ability for the women's basketball team to compete, stated that the signing day for football was approaching, and highlighted the women's volleyball team, noting their first win under head coach Caitlin Schweihofer, as well as the first time the team won its Big Ten opener. Hobbs also reviewed the anticipated start dates of various other sports, including track and field, cross country, men's golf, women's golf, and tennis. He stated that there are still no schedules for baseball, softball, men's and women's lacrosse, field hockey, and rowing. He pointed out that traditionally 8 teams would be in competition in the first week of March, but this year, because of COVID, there'll be 19 teams in competition in March, which will put a tremendous strain on medical, facilities, and communication staff. Hobbs concluded with a discussion of Big Ten media rights distributions and a review of the anticipated logistics for the Big Ten basketball tournament. Dr. Joshua Burchard, Chief Medical Officer for the Division of Intercollegiate Athletics, provided a medical update to the committee. Dr. Burchard reviewed issues related to COVID-19 across athletics and what the division is doing to protect student athletes. He explained that as the division moves forward, it will continue to social distance, wear masks, and advise teams on the best ways that they can travel safely. He noted that logistics and return to play protocols become more complicated with teams that travel via bus and have multiple games per week due to variations in testing protocols. He then reviewed the testing protocols for teams considered high risk, as well as those considered low risk. And finally, Dr. Burchard addressed the return to play protocols, which include a 17-day quarantine period, completion of cardiac MRI and acclimatization to play, ensuring they are physically ready to play after sitting for 17 days. Ms. Sarah Baumgartner, Deputy Director of Athletics, updated the committee on football season's ticket sales, highlighting that the division is pacing well ahead of the past 3 years and that the staff is ready to capitalize on an exciting time for Rutgers football. She noted that the division spends a lot of time strategizing around data and analytics and highlighted an effort to be more thoughtful and strategic around lead generations. Baumgartner then discussed total engagement through phone calls and digital ads, email ads, and email opens. Ms. Baumgartner also discussed a donor feasibility study and how that study would fit within the physical master plan. And finally, Ms. Baumgartner updated the committee on the Multimedia Rights Partnership and reviewed how the pandemic has impacted that partnership and what it might look like in the future. Mr. Matthew Pottorff, Senior Associate Athletic Director and Chief Compliance Officer, provided a compliance update, began by highlighting National Signing Day and discussing the types of issues his team assists with, such as scholarship destinations. He also outlined the one-time transfer exemption and explained how it might impact incoming transfer student athletes. Pottorff noted that the university is currently in the dead period, quote unquote, for recruiting until April 15th, 2021, in which no contact with prospective student athletes may be made. He stated that the next phase is known as the quiet period, in which prospective student athletes may visit campus, but coaches may not travel out of state to recruit. And finally, Pottorff also updated the committee on the pending legislation that would allow student athletes to get paid for their use of name, image, and likeness. Mr. Mike Zuhl, Senior Associate Athletic Director for Finance, Administration, and Planning, provided an update on the division's budget, and then the meeting was adjourned at approximately 3 p.m. And that's the report for the Committee on Intercollegiate Athletics.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vice Chair Best, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? Upon recommendation of the Committee on Academic and Student Affairs, Committee on Finance and Facilities, and Committee on Health Affairs, Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve the items contained in the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Best. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Motion carries. Ms. McHugh. Susan McHugh, your hand is raised and you are muted.
Oh, apologies. I didn't mean to raise my hand. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. I
don't
saw
have
another
that.
raised hand. I saw another raised hand. Gavin, was that you?
It was, Mr. Chair.
Please,
I have a
Mays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Brown. Would they be considered out of line with what his updates were from his committee? You broke up, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry.
Please proceed with your question, Mr. Mays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, in your discussion with Dr. Burchard, was mental health services brought up for student athletes?
Gavin, I don't remember if it was specifically covered in that session that we last met, but he has talked about that topic as well in previous meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe, Mr. Oliver, the floor is yours. Having said that, before you start, I would say that I am delighted with the reports of the help that the Senate is providing to the university, particularly to its president. Very, very grateful. May it continue for a good long time. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to say that the Senate is delighted to, continue to work with the board and the president and to do everything that we can that's in the best interest of the university. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, the University Senate returned to work after the holidays on Friday, January 8th, 2021. We began this calendar year by requesting and receiving reports from senior administrators on several important issues. Senior Vice President for Strategy, Brian Ballantyne, Vice Chancellor for Finance, New Brunswick, Romaine Body, and Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor, Newark, Ashwani Manga, joined the Senate to update it on the work of the Responsibility Center Management Committee. Senior Vice President for Equity, Anna Branch, joined the Senate to discuss her diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that her office is working on. Senior Vice President for Research, David Kimball, and Associate Vice President Tatiana Litvin-Vetniak joined the Senate to present on proposed changes to the university's patent policy. Senior Vice President for Human Resources, Vivian Fernandez, joined the Senate to speak to the Staff Caucus in February on staff promotion, and will join again in March with the University Structure and Governance Committee on staff Senate elections. And Executive Vice President for Finance, Mike Gower, will join the Senate to speak to the Student Affairs Committee in March in discussion of the student health insurance plans. The Senate Executive Committee has approved 2 ad hoc committees, one on Senate attendance and the other on Senate leadership and culture. Both ad hoc committees to report back to the Senate in an effort to ensure better senator attendance once we return to campus and to improve the pathways to Senate leadership roles. In addition, as of the end of December 2020, our standing committees were investigating 27 active charges. Since we returned from the holidays, the following have come before the full Senate for a vote, and the approved resolutions have been transmitted to the President's office. Several new charges have been added to the agendas of each of our standing committees, and I'll introduce these at my next report, along with the progress of the Senate on all the current and new charges under study. Charges that I just want to point out very quickly, and the full text of them are in the written report that I'll provide, but the Senate is looking at, the ones that the Senate has already decided and sent to the President for his look are re-examination of the at-drop period during the COVID-19 crisis and beyond, normal teaching loads of faculty, re-evaluation of student fee consolidation, a proposed resolution on the Rutgers Faculty Council's inclusion in the University Policy Library, and honorary degree and commencement speaker changes that we're proposing. In addition, there are many other reports, again, in my written report, and many other charges that the Senate is looking at and all the standing committees are looking at right now. So just indulge one last moment. Finally, one last announcement. Rutgers will host the Big Ten Academic Alliance Senate Leadership Conference in October 2021. I've convened a group of past Rutgers Senate chairs to help me plan for this event. I'll update the board on our planning during my next report, and this concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Does any member of the board wish to say anything about anything? Hearing none, this is yours.
Mr. Chair, I think you broke up there.
Love this technology. Mr. President, the last word is yours.
Oh, yes, you did. You certainly did break up. I have no final word. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I have a motion
Move
to
it.
adjourn? Second. See you all in April. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Keep well.